The wedding dress felt like a funeral shroud. Niall Robinson stood in front of a floor-length mirror in a room that cost more than her entire apartment building, staring at a reflection she barely recognized. The white silk gown hugged her brown skin like it was custom-made, which it was. Probably cost more than her yearly salary. Her natural curls had been styled into an elegant updo that she'd never be able to recreate herself, and the diamond earrings weighing down her lobes could probably pay off her mother's medical bills 3 times over. But none of that mattered, because in exactly 17 minutes, she was going to marry a monster. Not metaphorically, not the kind of monster who just happened to be a terrible person. An actual, honest-to-God, blood-drinking, immortal vampire who could probably snap her neck with his pinky finger if the mood struck him. Niall's hands trembled as she clutched the bouquet of white roses someone had placed in her grip. She didn't remember who. The last 3 hours had been a blur of hair pulling, makeup brushing, and people speaking to her in hushed, pitying tones like she was already dead. Maybe she was. Miss Robinson, a sharp voice cut through her spiraling thoughts. It's time. Niall turned to see a tall Korean woman in an immaculate black suit standing in the doorway. Her name was something elegant that Niall couldn't pronounce, but everyone called her Mrs. Key. She was Cale Shin's head of staff, and her expression hadn't changed once since Niall had met her. Perfectly neutral, perfectly cold, perfectly terrifying. Niall's voice came out as a whisper. I can't do this. Mrs. Key's eyebrow raised a fraction of an inch. Your mother is currently receiving her second round of chemotherapy at Mercy General Hospital. The treatment costs $47,000. Your younger brother, Dante, is enrolled at Jefferson High School. His tuition for the year is $18,000. Your father's funeral expenses, which Mr. Shin graciously covered last month, totaled $12,000. Each word hit like a physical blow. Shall I continue? Mrs. Key asked, her tone still perfectly pleasant. Or shall we proceed with the ceremony? Niall felt tears prick her eyes, but she blinked them back. She'd made a deal with the devil, or something close enough, and the devil always collected his debts. Let's go, Niall said, forcing her spine straight. Mrs. Key nodded once, then turned and walked down the hallway. Niall followed, her heels clicking against marble floors that probably cost more per square foot than most people's cars. The Shin estate was massive, a sprawling mansion in the hills outside of Los Angeles that looked like something out of a movie. Niall had grown up in a 2-bedroom apartment in Inglewood where the hot water only worked half the time. This place had 17 bathrooms. She'd counted. They walked through corridors lined with artwork that Niall suspected belonged in museums, past windows that overlooked manicured gardens that seemed to stretch for miles. Everything about this place screamed old money, power, and danger. Finally, they reached a set of double doors made of dark wood carved with intricate designs that looked vaguely Asian in origin. Mrs. Key pushed them open without ceremony. The room beyond took Niall's breath away. It was some kind of private chapel, all dark wood and stained glass, with candles flickering from every surface. But there were no guests filling the pews, no photographer capturing the moment, no weeping relatives or smiling friends. Just him. Cale Shin stood at the altar in a black suit that probably cost more than a car, his hands clasped behind his back, his expression completely unreadable. He was beautiful in that dangerous, otherworldly way that made Niall's survival instincts scream at her to run. He looked to be in his late 20s, but Niall knew he was much, much older than that. His black hair was styled perfectly, his features sharp and distinctly Korean, his posture radiating the kind of confidence that came from being the most dangerous thing in any room. And his eyes. Even from across the room, Niall could see them, dark, intense, and completely inhuman when the light hit them just right. Those were the eyes of a predator. Miss Robinson, Cale said, his voice smooth and accented, carrying easily across the empty chapel. "How lovely of you to join us. I was beginning to wonder if you'd attempt to run." Nael forced herself to walk down the aisle, each step feeling like a mile. "Where would I go?" "Nowhere," Cale replied simply. "I would find you." It wasn't a threat. It was just a fact, delivered in the same tone someone might use to comment on the weather. Nael reached the altar and stood facing him, clutching her bouquet like a shield. Up close, Cale was even more intimidating, tall, probably 6 feet, with a presence that seemed to take up the entire room. An elderly man in traditional efficient robes stood between them, looking like he wanted to be literally anywhere else. Nael didn't blame him. "Shall we begin?" the officiant asked, his voice shaking slightly. Cale nodded once. The ceremony was brief and cold. There was no talk of love or cherishing or happy futures, just legal binding, contracts, and obligations. Nael spoke her vows like she was reciting a grocery list, her voice flat and mechanical. When it came time for Cale to speak, his eyes locked on hers. "I, Cale Shin, take you, Nael Robinson, as my wife, bound by blood and contract, until such time as our agreement is fulfilled. Not till death do us part." Because death probably didn't apply to him. "The rings," the officiant prompted. Mrs. Key appeared from somewhere behind them, holding a small velvet box. Inside were 2 rings, both platinum, both embedded with stones that caught the candlelight. Cale took Nael's hand. His skin was cool to the touch, and she felt a small shock run through her at the contact. He slid the ring onto her finger with clinical precision, his expression never changing. When it was Nael's turn, her hands shook so badly she nearly dropped Cale's ring. He steadied her with one hand, his grip gentle but firm, and guided the ring onto his own finger. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," the officiant said quickly, like he was trying to get through a painful medical procedure as fast as possible. "You may kiss the bride." Nael's heart stopped. She hadn't thought about this part. Cale leaned in slowly, giving her just enough time to see the faint amusement in his dark eyes, and pressed his lips to hers. The kiss was brief, chaste, and cold as ice. When he pulled back, Nael was shaking for entirely different reasons. "Welcome to the family, Mrs. Shin," Cale said softly. "If you're already hooked and want to see how Nael survives her first night as a vampire's wife, smash that like button and subscribe, because things are about to get dangerous." 3 hours later, Nael found herself alone in what Mrs. Key had called the East Wing Suite, which was apparently where she'd be living. The suite was larger than her childhood apartment, decorated in shades of cream and gold, with a bed that could probably sleep 6 people comfortably. There was a sitting area, a walk-in closet already filled with clothes in her exact size, which was creepy, and a bathroom made entirely of marble with a tub that looked more like a small swimming pool. Nael had changed out of the wedding dress and into a simple pair of jeans and a sweater. Her own clothes, the ones she'd packed in a desperate attempt to hold onto some piece of her old life. She sat on the edge of the massive bed, her phone in her hands, staring at a text message from her brother. "Dante, Mom's treatment went good today. She's sleeping now. The doctors say she's responding well. Thank you, NY. I know what you did for us. I love you." Nael felt tears slip down her cheeks. This was why. This was why she'd signed the contract, why she'd agreed to marry a vampire, why she'd sold her freedom to a monster. Because her family needed her. Her father had died 2 months ago, a heart attack, sudden and devastating. He'd left behind medical bills, funeral expenses, and no life insurance. Then her mother's cancer diagnosis had come 3 weeks later, like the universe had decided the Robinson family hadn't suffered enough. Nael had been working 2 jobs, waitressing during the day, cleaning offices at night, and it still wasn't enough. The bills kept piling up. Her mother needed treatment. Her brother needed to stay in school. She'd been drowning. And then Kale Shin had appeared. It had been a normal Thursday night. Niall had been walking home from her cleaning job at 2 a.m., exhausted and barely able to keep her eyes open, when she'd heard the sound of a struggle in an alley. Every instinct had told her to keep walking, mind her business, get home safe. But Niall had never been good at minding her business. She'd looked into the alley and seen 3 men attacking someone. Without thinking, she'd grabbed the pepper spray on her keychain and screamed, "Hey, leave him alone." The attackers had scattered like cockroaches when the lights turned on. And the victim had stood up, brushed off his expensive suit, and looked at Niall with dark, amused eyes. "That was remarkably foolish," Kale had said. "Those men had knives." "Are you okay?" Niall had asked, ignoring his comment. "I'm perfectly fine. They couldn't have harmed me if they'd tried." Something about the way he'd said it had made the hair on the back of Niall's neck stand up. "Right, well, glad you're good. I'm gonna go." She'd started to leave, but Kale had appeared in front of her, moving faster than should have been humanly possible. "Wait," he'd said. "You helped me. I owe you a debt." "No debt, just be more careful, okay?" Kale had smiled then, and Niall had seen his teeth, perfectly white, perfectly normal, except for the canines that were just slightly too long, too sharp. "I'm always careful," he'd said, "but you're right, I do owe you, Kale Shin." He'd handed her a business card. "If you ever need anything, call that number. I pay my debts." Then he disappeared into the night, moving so fast he seemed to blur. Niall had stood in that alley for a full 5 minutes, her heart pounding, wondering if she'd imagined the whole thing. She'd kept the card, though. And 3 weeks later, when the hospital had called to say her mother needed immediate treatment that cost more money than Niall could earn in 5 years, when the bills had become a mountain she couldn't climb, when she'd had absolutely no options left. She'd called the number. Kale had answered on the first ring. 24 hours later, she'd been sitting in his office, a massive space at the top of a downtown LA skyscraper, listening to him make an offer. "I'll pay for everything," Kale had said, his fingers steepled in front of him. "Your mother's treatment, your brother's education, all your debts cleared. In exchange, you'll marry me and remain my wife for 1 year." Niall had laughed. "Is this a joke? Are you insane?" "I assure you I'm quite serious. I need a wife for business purposes. You need money, it's a simple transaction." "Nothing about this is simple. I don't even know you." "You know I have the resources to help your family. Isn't that enough?" "Why me?" Niall had demanded. "You're obviously rich. You could marry anyone." Kale had been quiet for a long moment, studying her with those dark, intense eyes. "Because you helped me when you thought I was in danger, despite the risk to yourself. Because you ask for nothing in return. Because you're exactly what I need, someone with a good heart who can be trusted to honor an agreement." "This is insane." "Perhaps, but your mother's cancer won't wait for sanity." He'd pushed a contract across the desk, 20 pages of legal language that basically boiled down to: marry him, live with him for 1 year, play the role of his wife in public, and in exchange, he'd take care of everything. Niall had read it 3 times, looking for the catch. "What do you get out of this?" she'd asked. "That's my concern. Do we have an agreement?" Niall had thought about her mother, weak and tired in a hospital bed. About her brother, trying to be strong but still just a kid who'd lost his father and might lose his mother too. She'd signed. That had been 2 weeks ago. And now she was married to a vampire CEO who she'd known for less than a month, living in a mansion that felt more like a prison, wearing a ring that felt like a shackle. A knock on the door pulled Niall from her thoughts. "Come in," she called, wiping at her eyes. Mrs. Key entered, carrying a tray with what looked like dinner, some kind of gourmet meal that probably had a French name Niall couldn't pronounce. Mr. Shin requests your presence in his study after you've eaten, Mrs. Key said, setting the tray on a small table. And if I don't want to go? Mrs. Key's expression didn't change. It wasn't a request. She left before Nael could respond. Nael stared at the food, her appetite gone. But she forced herself to eat a few bites, knowing she'd need her strength for whatever came next. 30 minutes later, she found herself standing outside a heavy wooden door on the opposite end of the mansion. She'd had to ask for directions twice. This place was a maze. She knocked. Enter. Nael pushed the door open and stepped into Kale's study. The room was exactly what she'd expected, all dark wood, leather chairs, and floor-to-ceiling bookshelves. A fire crackled in a massive fireplace, and Kale sat behind a desk that probably weighed more than Nael's car, reading something on a tablet. He looked up when she entered, his expression unreadable. Sit, he said, gesturing to a chair across from him. Nael sat, her spine straight, refusing to show fear. We need to discuss the terms of our arrangement, Kale said. I read the contract. Reading and understanding are different things. Let me be clear about what's expected of you. He set down the tablet and leaned back in his chair, his dark eyes fixed on her. In public, you are my devoted wife. You'll accompany me to business functions, smile appropriately, and play the role convincingly. In private, you'll live in this house, maintain appearances for the staff, and stay out of my way. That's it? Nael asked. Just pretend to be in love with you at parties and otherwise be invisible. Essentially. What about, Nael hesitated, then forced herself to ask, what about, married stuff? Kale's eyebrow raised slightly. If you're asking whether I expect conjugal relations, the answer is no. This is a business arrangement, nothing more. Nael felt relief flood through her. Okay, good. However, Kale continued, there are other rules you need to understand. First, you don't leave the estate without my permission and an escort. Second, you don't discuss our arrangement with anyone. Third, you don't enter the west wing of the house. Ever. Why not? Because I said so. That's not an answer. Kale's expression hardened. It's the only answer you're getting. The west wing is off limits. If I find that you've disobeyed, our contract is void and your family loses everything. Am I clear? Nael's jaw clenched. Crystal. Good. Fourth, there will be nights when I'm not myself. When that happens, Mrs. Key will inform you to stay in your room. You'll lock the door and not emerge until morning. No exceptions. A chill ran down Nael's spine. Not yourself how? Kale was quiet for a long moment, his eyes reflecting the firelight in a way that made them seem to glow. I'm sure you've noticed I'm not entirely human, Nael. Hearing him say it out loud made it real in a way it hadn't been before. You're a vampire, Nael whispered. Among other things, and sometimes my nature requires accommodation. On those nights, it's not safe for you to be around me. Are you saying you might hurt me? I'm saying I'd rather not take the chance. Nael stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. This is insane. You're insane. I can't live like this. You can and you will. You signed a contract. Contracts can be broken. Not this one. Kale stood as well, and even across the desk, Nael could feel the power radiating from him. Your mother received her treatment today. Your brother's tuition was paid in full. I've invested considerable resources in your family's well-being. In exchange, you gave me 1 year of your life. I intend to collect. Nael felt trapped, cornered, helpless. I saved your life, she said quietly. And I'm saving your family's. We're even. They stared at each other across the desk, Nael's heart pounding, Kale's expression perfectly calm. Finally, Nael broke the silence. Fine, 1 year. But after that, I'm gone, and you never contact me or my family again. Agreed. And I want to see my mother and brother once a week. Kale considered this. Twice a month, supervised visits. Once a week, unsupervised, or I walk right now, and you can sue me for breach of contract or whatever. Something flickered in Kale's eyes, surprise maybe, respect. You're braver than you look, he said. I'm too tired to be scared anymore. Kale smiled just slightly. Once a week, 2 hours, Mrs. Key will drive you. I can drive myself. Mrs. Key will drive you. Niall knew when she was beaten. Fine. Anything else? Yeah, stay out of my room, don't drink my blood, and we'll get along just fine. Kale actually laughed, a short, sharp sound that seemed to surprise him as much as it surprised Niall. I'll do my best, he said. You're dismissed. Niall turned to leave, but stopped at the door. Kale. Yes. What happens after a year? You just let me go. Kale was quiet for so long that Niall thought he might not answer. After a year, he finally said, you'll be free, contract fulfilled, you can return to your normal life. And you? I'll find another solution to my problem. What problem? Kale's expression closed off. Good night, Niall. It was clearly a dismissal. Niall left the study and made her way back to her room, her mind racing. She'd thought this would be simple, a business transaction, nothing more. But there were layers here she didn't understand. Why did Kale need a wife? What was in the West Wing? What happened on the nights when he wasn't himself? And why, despite everything, did part of her want to find out? Back in her suite, Niall changed into pajamas and climbed into the massive bed. The sheets were silk and probably cost more than her monthly rent used to. She lay in the darkness, staring at the ceiling, trying to process everything that had happened. She was married to a vampire. She lived in a mansion. Her family was safe. And she had absolutely no idea what she'd gotten herself into. Sleep came slowly, and when it did, Niall dreamed of dark eyes, sharp teeth, and a year that suddenly seemed very, very long. The first week passed in a strange, surreal blur. Niall established a routine: wake up, eat breakfast alone in her room, explore the parts of the mansion she was allowed in, avoid Kale, read, watch TV, go to bed. It was like being on a very luxurious house arrest. She saw Kale only twice. Once at breakfast on her third day. He'd entered the dining room, poured himself a cup of coffee, stared at her for an uncomfortably long moment, then left without saying a word. And once when she'd accidentally wandered too close to the West Wing. He'd appeared out of nowhere, blocking her path, his expression dangerous. I believe I told you this area was off limits, he'd said, his voice cold. I got lost. Then I suggest you find your way back. He'd watched her retreat, his dark eyes tracking her every movement until she turned the corner. On her 8th day as Mrs. Shin, Niall finally got permission to visit her family. Mrs. Key drove her in a sleek black car that probably cost more than Niall would earn in her entire lifetime, maintaining perfect silence the entire drive. When they pulled up to Mercy General Hospital, Niall practically jumped out of the car. 2 hours, Mrs. Key said. I'll be waiting here. Niall didn't answer. She was already running toward the entrance. Her mother was in room 347, and Niall's heart pounded as she rode the elevator up. She hadn't seen her mom since the wedding, and she'd been coached extensively by Mrs. Key on what to say. Your mother believes you married a successful businessman who you've been dating quietly for several months. She thinks this is a love match. Do not deviate from this story. Niall hated lying, but she understood the necessity. She knocked on the door of room 347, then pushed it open. Her mother was sitting up in bed, looking thin and tired but alive. Her head was covered with a colorful scarf, and she was smiling. Baby girl, Patricia Robinson exclaimed, opening her arms. Niall rushed forward and hugged her mother carefully, mindful of the IV in her arm. Hi, Mama, Nael whispered, fighting back tears. Let me look at you. Her mother pulled back, studying Nael's face. You look different, stressed. Is married life already getting to you? Nael forced a laugh. Just adjusting. How are you feeling? Better every day. The doctors say the treatment is working. They're optimistic. Her mother's eyes filled with tears. I can't thank your husband enough, Nael, what he's done for us. It's a miracle. Guilt twisted in Nael's stomach. Yeah, he's great. When do I get to actually meet this mysterious man? You married him so fast, I haven't even had a proper conversation with him. Soon, Mama. He's just been busy with work. They talked for an hour. About her mother's treatment, about Dante's school, about everything except the truth of Nael's situation. When visiting hours were almost up, her mother grabbed Nael's hand. Are you happy, baby? She asked quietly. Nael forced a smile. I'm fine, Mama, don't worry about me. That's not what I asked. Nael looked into her mother's eyes, the same deep brown as her own, and wanted desperately to tell her everything. About the contract, about Kale being a vampire, about how she'd sold herself to save them. But she couldn't. I'm adjusting, Nael said finally. It's all still new, but yeah, I'm happy. It was the biggest lie she'd ever told. Her mother seemed to accept it, though, and pulled Nael into another hug. I love you so much, she whispered. Your daddy would be so proud of how you've taken care of us. Nael left the hospital with tears streaming down her face. Mrs. Key didn't comment on it during the drive back. When they returned to the mansion, Nael went straight to her room and cried into her pillow until she had no tears left. This was her life now, and she had no idea how she was going to survive it. Y'all, Nael's life is about to get even more complicated. Don't miss what happens when she breaks Kale's rules. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications, because episode 2 is going to be wild. That night, Nael couldn't sleep. She tossed and turned in the massive bed, her mind replaying her mother's question over and over. Are you happy? No, she wasn't happy. She was trapped in a gilded cage, married to a monster, living a lie to protect the people she loved. Around midnight, Nael gave up on sleep and decided to explore the mansion. Maybe a walk would clear her head. She pulled on a robe over her pajamas and slipped out of her room, padding barefoot through the silent hallways. The mansion was different at night, darker, more mysterious, with shadows that seemed to move on their own. Moonlight streamed through the massive windows, painting everything in silver. Nael wandered aimlessly, turning corners at random, until she realized with a start that she'd somehow ended up near the West Wing. She should turn back. Kale had been very clear about the rules. But Nael had never been good at following rules. She crept closer, her curiosity overwhelming her common sense. What was in the West Wing that Kale wanted to hide so badly? The hallway was darker here, with fewer windows. There was a door at the end, heavy and imposing, with some kind of electronic lock. Nael approached it slowly, her heart hammering. She reached for the handle, knowing she shouldn't, knowing this was a terrible idea. The door swung open. Nael jumped back with a gasp. Kale stood in the doorway, his shirt unbuttoned, his hair disheveled, his eyes absolutely inhuman, glowing red in the darkness. And his mouth was stained with blood. I told you, Kale said, his voice rough and dangerous, to stay out of the West Wing. Nael couldn't speak, couldn't move, could barely breathe. Kale took a step toward her, and she finally found her voice. She screamed. The scream died in Nael's throat as Kale moved with inhuman speed, his hand covering her mouth before the sound could fully escape. Don't, he hissed, his red eyes boring into hers. You'll wake the entire household. Nael's heart was pounding so hard she thought it might explode. She was pressed against the wall, Kale's body blocking any escape, his hand still over her mouth. Up close, she could see the blood on his lips, smell the copper tang of it in the air. This was it. This was how she died. But then Kale stepped back, wiping his mouth with the back of his hand, and the red glow faded from his eyes, leaving them dark and exhausted. "It's not human blood," he said quietly, like he could read her thoughts. "I don't hurt people, Niall." "Then whose blood is it?" Niall managed to whisper. "Medical supply, donated blood from a hospital. I have a stockpile." Kale ran a hand through his hair, looking more human than she'd ever seen him, tired, frustrated, almost vulnerable. "This is why I told you to stay away. I feed at night. It's not something I wanted you to witness." Niall's back was still pressed against the wall, her whole body shaking. "You could have just told me that. Would you have believed me? Or would you have been even more terrified?" Honestly, Niall didn't know. They stood in the hallway for a long moment, neither speaking. The silence was heavy, thick with tension. Finally, Kale sighed. "You should go back to your room." "I couldn't sleep." "Try harder." "I'm not a child. You can't just order me around." Kale's eyes flashed with something, anger, amusement. "Actually, according to our contract, I can do exactly that. The contract says I have to be your wife in public and stay in the house. It doesn't say I have to follow your every command like some kind of servant. It says you have to obey the rules of the household. Not entering the West Wing is a rule. A stupid rule. A necessary one." They glared at each other, and Niall felt a spark of defiance burn through her fear. "What's in there?" she demanded, pointing at the door behind him. "What are you hiding?" "That's none of your concern." "I'm your wife. Everything about you is my concern." "You're my wife on paper only. Don't confuse a business transaction with actual intimacy." The words stung more than Niall wanted to admit. "Fine," she snapped. "Keep your secrets, but don't expect me to just blindly obey you. I'm not one of your employees." "No, you're much more expensive." Niall felt like she'd been slapped. "Screw you." She turned to leave, but Kale's voice stopped her. "Niall." She didn't turn around. "I'm sorry," Kale said quietly. "That was cruel." Niall looked back at him, surprised. Kale Shin didn't seem like the type to apologize. He was leaning against the doorframe, looking less like a dangerous vampire CEO and more like a man who was very, very tired. "I'm not good at this," he admitted. "At having someone else in my space, at explaining myself. I've been alone for a very long time." Something in his voice made Niall's anger fade. "How long?" she asked. Kale smiled, but it was sad. "Longer than you can imagine." "Try me." 237 years, give or take." Niall's brain struggled to process that. "You're over 200 years old." "I was born in 1786 in what is now South Korea. I was turned in 1812. I've been this ever since." The casual way he said it made it somehow more real. Niall didn't know how to finish that sentence. "Impossible, terrifying, lonely," Kale supplied. "All of the above." "Yes, it is." They looked at each other across the hallway, and for the first time since this nightmare had started, Niall saw Kale as something more than just a monster or a business arrangement. He was a person, an ancient, immortal, complicated person, but still a person. "Why did you need a wife?" Niall asked. "What's this really about?" Kale hesitated, like he was weighing how much to tell her. "There are politics in the vampire world," he said finally. "Old families, old rules, old expectations. One of those expectations is that vampires of a certain age and status should be married. It's a sign of stability, of integration into human society, of control. And you needed to prove you're stable and controlled. Something like that. There's a council, the immortal court, that governs our kind. They've been pressuring me for years to settle down, to show that I'm not a threat. A human wife is the ultimate sign of domestication." The way he said the word made it clear how much he hated it. So I'm basically a prop, Niall said. Proof that you're a good little vampire who won't cause trouble. You're proof that I'm willing to follow their archaic rules long enough to get them off my back. And after a year, you go free, and I tell the council that human marriage is too complicated and fragile for immortals. I'll have fulfilled the requirement and bought myself at least another century of peace. It was a cynical, calculated plan, but at least it made sense. Okay, Niall said. Okay. I get it now. Why you needed this. It's still weird and controlling and kind of insulting, but I get it. Kale looked almost relieved. Thank you. But I have conditions. His eyebrow raised. You're in no position to negotiate. Sure I am. You need me to play the devoted wife, right? To convince this council that we're actually married and happy. I can do that. Or I can make it really obvious that this is fake. Your choice. Kale's jaw tightened, but there was respect in his eyes. What do you want? One, I want to know what's in the West Wing. Not right now, but eventually. No more secrets. Fine, eventually. Two, I want actual freedom. Not just supervised visits with my family. I want to be able to leave the estate, go places, have a life. With Mrs. Key as your escort. Without an escort. Absolutely not, it's not safe. Why not? Who's going to hurt me? Kale's expression darkened. You're married to me now. That makes you a target for my enemies, and I have quite a few. Niall hadn't thought of that. Oh. So yes, you can have more freedom, but you'll have protection, non-negotiable. Fine. Three, I want the truth. If you need me to attend some vampire function or meet this council or whatever, I want advance warning and full information. No more surprises. Agreed. And four, Niall hesitated. I want to actually get to know you. If we're going to sell this, we need to be able to at least have a conversation without it being a negotiation or a fight. Kale studied her for a long moment. You want to be friends. I want to be people who can stand to be in the same room together. Fair enough. Kale straightened up from the doorframe. Dinner tomorrow night, just the two of us. We'll talk. Okay. And Niall, stay out of the West Wing until I can properly show you what's in there. I promise I will, but it needs to be on my terms. Because some things require context. It was cryptic, but Niall nodded. Okay. Good night, Niall. Good night, Kale. Niall walked back to her room, her mind spinning. In the span of 20 minutes, her understanding of Kale Shin had completely shifted. He wasn't just a monster. He was a man trapped by rules he didn't make, trying to navigate a world he'd been living in for centuries, and lonely in a way Niall couldn't fully comprehend. And despite everything, the fear, the anger, the bizarre circumstances, part of her actually wanted to help him. Maybe she was going crazy. Or maybe this was just her life now. Dinner the next night was less awkward than Niall had expected. Mrs. Key had set up a private dining room, smaller than the formal dining hall, with a table that only sat 6 instead of 20. Candles flickered on the table, and soft music played from hidden speakers. It was almost romantic. Except for the part where Niall was having dinner with a vampire, who'd paid for her like a business expense. Kale arrived exactly on time, dressed casually in dark jeans and a button-down shirt. Niall had changed into a simple dress, not wanting to look like she'd tried too hard. You look nice, Kale said, pulling out her chair. Thanks, you too. They sat down, and Mrs. Key brought out the first course, some kind of soup that smelled amazing. I wasn't sure what you liked, so I had the chef prepare a variety, Kale said. You have a chef? I have several, they work in shifts. Of course he did. They ate in silence for a few moments before Niall decided to break the ice. So, 237 years old, you've seen a lot of history. Too much of it. What's the craziest thing you've witnessed? Kale considered this. I watched the Korean War destroy my homeland. I saw the Industrial Revolution transform England. I was in San Francisco during the 1906 earthquake. I've seen empires rise and fall, technologies that seemed like magic become commonplace, and humanity repeatedly make the same mistakes in different clothes. Sounds exhausting. It is. Do you have family? Other vampires, I mean. Kale's expression shuddered. I did once. What happened? They're gone. Vampires are immortal, but we're not indestructible. My maker was killed in 1847. My brother, turned by the same vampire, died in 1903. It's just me now. The loneliness in his voice was painful to hear. I'm sorry, Niall said softly. It was a long time ago. Doesn't make it hurt less. Kale looked at her, something shifting in his expression. No, it doesn't. They continued eating, the conversation flowing more easily. Kale asked about Niall's life before their arrangement, and she told him about her family, her jobs, her dreams of maybe going to college someday. Why didn't you, Kale asked, go to college, I mean? Money. My parents couldn't afford it, and I couldn't afford to take on debt when I needed to help support the family. What would you have studied? Art, maybe. I used to draw a lot when I was younger, or social work, something that helped people. You can still do that. The contract doesn't prohibit education. Niall laughed. I'm a little busy being a vampire's fake wife. The year will pass, and when it does, you'll have the money to do whatever you want. The contract had included a substantial payment at the end of the year, enough to pay for college twice over and still have plenty left. I guess, Niall said, it's hard to think that far ahead. I understand. For me, thinking in decades is normal. I forget that humans live in much smaller increments. Must be weird, watching everyone around you age and die while you stay the same. It's the worst part of immortality. Everyone you care about eventually leaves. Is that why you don't get close to people? Kale set down his fork. One of the reasons, yes. What are the others? I'm dangerous, Niall. Not just because of what I am, but because of the world I inhabit. The vampire court, the politics, the power struggles, it's vicious. Anyone close to me becomes a liability. Like me. Like you. So why did you agree to let me visit my family? That makes them a liability too. Kale was quiet for a moment. Because I'm not cruel enough to separate you from the people you love. I may be a monster, but I try to have some principles. You're not a monster. Kale looked surprised. I'm literally a blood-drinking immortal predator. Yeah, but you drink donated blood from hospitals. You're trying to follow rules you hate to keep some council happy. You're protecting me even though I'm just a business arrangement. Monsters don't do that. You don't know what I'm capable of. Maybe not, but I know what you've chosen to do, and that matters. Kale stared at her like he'd never seen her before. You're remarkably naive, he said finally, but his tone was gentle. Or maybe you're remarkably harder on yourself than you need to be. Something in Kale's expression cracked, just for a moment, and Niall saw the weight of 2 centuries of loneliness pressing down on him. Then the moment passed, and Kale's usual controlled mask slipped back into place. Dessert, he offered. Hold up. Niall and Kale are actually starting to understand each other, but you know drama is coming. Like this video if you're Team Niall, and subscribe to see what happens when the Vampire Council comes calling. You do not want to miss the next part. They fell into an unexpected routine over the next 2 weeks. Dinner together 3 times a week. Conversations that ranged from light and easy to deep and complicated. Kale showing Niall parts of the estate she hadn't seen. The library massive with books in at least a dozen languages. The gardens meticulously maintained, stretching for acres. The art collection, featuring pieces that Niall recognized from textbooks. Cale was funny, she discovered. He had a dry, sarcastic sense of humor that caught her off guard. And he was smart, not just educated but thoughtful, with perspectives shaped by centuries of observation. Niall found herself actually enjoying his company, which was confusing and terrifying, and not at all part of the plan. On the 16th day of her marriage, Mrs. Key informed her that Cale wanted to see her in his study immediately. Niall went, her stomach twisting with nervousness. Immediate summons were never good. She found Cale packing in front of the fireplace, tension radiating from every line of his body. "What's wrong?" Niall asked. "The council is coming," Cale said tersely. "Tomorrow night they want to meet you." "Okay, so we do what we've been preparing for. I play the loving wife, you play the devoted husband. We convince them we're legit." It's not that simple. The council's investigator is Mina Park. She's ancient, powerful, and extremely perceptive. If there's any crack in our story, she'll find it. Then we make sure there are no cracks. Cale stopped packing and looked at her. "This isn't a game, Niall. If Mina decides our marriage is fake, there will be consequences." "Like what?" "Like the council forcing me to turn you into a vampire to prove our commitment. Or deciding I'm too unstable to be left unsupervised, and assigning me a handler who will control every aspect of my existence. Or, at worst, deciding I'm a threat and ordering my execution." Niall's blood ran cold. They can do that. They're the governing body for all vampires in North America. They can do whatever they want. "Okay," Niall took a deep breath, forcing herself to think. "Okay, then we make this convincing. What does Mina need to see?" "A couple who is genuinely in love, who knows each other, who has a real connection." "We have a connection. We've been getting to know each other. We've been having dinner and polite conversations. That's not the same as being in love. So we fake it. Mina will know. Then we make it real enough that she can't tell the difference." Niall stepped closer to Cale. "What do couples in love do? They touch each other. They have inside jokes. They can finish each other's sentences. We can do that. In less than 24 hours. We'll have to." Cale looked skeptical but also desperate. "All right, we'll spend the day together, create a foundation that at least seems genuine. Not just seem, we'll make it real." The next 18 hours were intense. Cale and Niall barely left each other's side. They talked about everything: childhoods, fears, dreams, favorite foods, pet peeves, embarrassing moments. Cale told her about growing up in Josianira, Korea, about his family before they were killed in a village raid, about the vampire who turned him to save his life. Niall told him about her father's laugh, her mother's strength, her brother's terrible jokes, about the time she'd accidentally set the kitchen on fire trying to make pancakes, about her first heartbreak, her biggest regrets, her secret hope that maybe someday she'd make a difference in the world. They practiced touching, casual hand-holds, Cale's arm around her shoulders, Niall leaning into his side. It felt awkward at first, but the more they did it, the more natural it became. Cale's skin was cool but not unpleasantly so. And when he smiled, really smiled, not the polite mask he wore for the world, it transformed his entire face. By the time the sun set on the day of the council's visit, Niall felt like she actually knew Cale's shin. And maybe even liked him. Which was definitely not part of the plan. Mrs. Key helped Niall get ready, selecting an elegant navy dress and styling her hair in soft curls. "You look beautiful," Cale said when he saw her. "You have to say that, you're my husband." "I don't have to say anything, but it's true." Niall felt her cheeks warm. The council arrived at exactly 8 p.m., 3 vampires in an expensive black car. Niall and Cale stood together in the foyer as Mrs. Key opened the door. The first to enter was a tall Asian woman who looked to be in her early 40s, with sharp eyes and an even sharper suit. This had to be Mina Park. Behind her were two others, a white man with blonde hair and a bored expression, and a black woman with silver braids and kind eyes. "Kale," Mina said, her voice carrying the weight of authority. "How lovely to see you, and this must be your bride." "Niall," Kale said, his hands settling on the small of her back. "This is Investigator Mina Park, Counselor James Brennan, and Counselor Adana Okonkwo." "It's wonderful to meet you all," Niall said, offering her brightest smile. Mina's eyes narrowed slightly, studying Niall like a specimen under a microscope. "Charming," Mina said. "Shall we sit? We have much to discuss." This was it. Time to sell the performance of a lifetime. The next 2 hours were some of the most stressful of Niall's life. They sat in the formal living room, Niall and Kale on one sofa, the three council members spread across the other furniture. Mrs. Key served drinks, wine for the guests, nothing for Kale, vampires didn't drink wine apparently, and water for Niall, her hands were shaking too much to risk red wine on the expensive furniture. Mina asked questions, lots of questions. "How did you meet?" Niall and Kale had prepared for this. They told a version of the truth, the alley, the rescue, the connection. "And you fell in love how quickly?" "It wasn't quick," Niall said, reaching for Kale's hand. "It was gradual. We kept running into each other. Coffee dates, long conversations. Before I knew it, I couldn't imagine my life without him." Kale squeezed her hand, his eyes soft as he looked at her. "She's the most courageous person I've ever met. When she defended me in that alley, something changed. I'd been alone for so long, and suddenly there was this bright, fearless woman who saw me as worth saving." It was a good story. Parts of it were even true. Mina wasn't convinced. "And your family, Ms. Robinson, they approved of this rapid marriage?" "My mother was surprised but happy. My father," Niall's voice caught genuinely. "My father passed before he could meet Kale, but I think he would have approved." Adana, the black counselor, leaned forward with sympathy in her eyes. "I'm so sorry for your loss, child." "Thank you." "And Kale's, nature doesn't frighten you," Mina pressed. Niall looked at Kale, and for a moment forgot they were acting. "It did at first," she admitted. "But fear isn't the same as understanding. Kale is different, yes, but he's also kind, thoughtful, and protective. He's seen centuries of history and still chooses to be gentle. That's not something to fear, that's something to admire." Kale's expression shifted, something real and vulnerable passing across his face. Mina studied them both for a long, silent moment. "I'd like to speak with Ms. Robinson privately," she said finally. Kale tensed. "That's not—" "It's fine," Niall interrupted, squeezing his hand. "I don't have anything to hide." "Niall, trust me." Their eyes met, and Niall saw real worry in Kale's gaze. She stood, smoothing her dress. "Where would you like to talk?" Mina smiled, a sharp, predatory expression. "The garden, I think. I've always enjoyed Kale's gardens." Oh snap! Niall's about to face the Vampire Council alone. Will she be able to keep up the act? Smash that subscribe button and ring the bell because the next part is going to blow your mind. The garden was beautiful at night, lit by carefully placed lanterns that cast golden light across the paths. Mina walked slowly, her hands clasped behind her back, while Niall followed a step behind. "You're nervous," Mina observed. "I'm being interrogated by an ancient vampire. Nervous seems appropriate." Mina laughed. "Fair enough. But you don't need to be frightened of me, Niall. I'm not here to hurt you." "Then why are you here?" "To determine if Kale Shin is truly stable enough to be left unsupervised, or if he's simply found a clever way to manipulate the Council's requirements. And if you decide he's manipulating you, then measures will be taken." "What kind of measures?" Mina stopped walking and turned to face Niall. In the lantern light, her eyes seemed to glow slightly. "Why do you care? If this marriage is real, you have nothing to worry about. If it's fake, you're complicit in defrauding the immortal court, which carries its own consequences. Niall lifted her chin. I care because Cale is my husband. Real marriage or not, I'm not going to just stand by while people threaten him. Loyal, that's good, but loyalty to a contract isn't the same as love. Who says I'm loyal to the contract? Mina's eyebrow raised. Are you saying you love him? Niall hesitated. Did she? They'd known each other for less than a month. The marriage was fake. The whole thing was a business arrangement. But when she thought about Cale, his loneliness, his dry humor, his unexpected gentleness, the way he looked at her like she was something precious, her heart did something complicated. I'm saying, Niall said carefully, that Cale Shin is more than just a vampire or a business arrangement. He's a person who's been hurt and isolated and forced to follow rules that make no sense. And yeah, maybe we haven't known each other long. Maybe this all happened fast, but I know that I trust him. I know that I enjoy being around him. And I know that I would fight to protect him. If that's not the foundation of something real, I don't know what is. Mina studied her for a long, silent moment. You realize, she said finally, that loving a vampire is complicated. We live forever. You don't. Every day that passes ages you while Cale stays the same. In 20 years, you'll be middle-aged. In 40, elderly. In 60, probably dead. And Cale will still look exactly as he does now. I know. And that doesn't terrify you. Of course it does, but everything worth having is scary. Mina smiled. A real smile this time, not the sharp, predatory one. You're either remarkably brave or remarkably foolish, she said. Can I be both? Mina laughed. I think you and I are going to get along just fine, Niall Robinson Shin. They walked back to the house in comfortable silence. When they entered the living room, Cale immediately stood, his eyes searching Niall's face. Are you all right? He asked quietly. I'm fine. He pulled her close, and Niall realized with a start that it didn't feel like acting anymore. Mina addressed the room. I've completed my assessment. It's my recommendation to the council that Cale Shin's marriage be recognized as legitimate and that no further oversight is necessary at this time. Cale's relief was palpable. However, Mina continued, I will be checking in periodically, just to ensure everything remains stable. Of course, Cale said. The council members stood to leave. Adana approached Niall, placing a gentle hand on her arm. You're a brave young woman, she said quietly. If you ever need anything, advice, help, someone to talk to about the complexities of loving an immortal, please don't hesitate to contact me. She pressed a card into Niall's hand. After the council left, Niall and Cale stood in the foyer, the tension slowly draining from the air. We did it, Niall said. You did it. I was ready to fight them if they'd pushed harder. Violence probably wouldn't have helped our case. Cale laughed, a real genuine laugh that made Niall smile. Thank you, he said quietly, for what you said to Mina. Mrs. Key told me some of it. It was the truth. Was it? Niall looked up at him, at his dark eyes and uncertain expression, and realized with a jolt that somewhere along the way, this had stopped being purely business. Yeah, she said softly, it was. Cale reached up, his cool fingers brushing her cheek. Niall, Whatever he was going to say was interrupted by a loud crash from somewhere in the West Wing. Cale's entire demeanor changed instantly, his expression going from vulnerable to dangerous in a heartbeat. Stay here, he commanded, already moving toward the sound. But Niall had never been good at following orders. She ran after him. Niall had never seen Cale move like this. He practically flew down the corridors toward the West Wing, his body a blur of inhuman speed. Niall struggled to keep up, her heart pounding, her mind racing with possibilities. What was in the West Wing? What could make Cale look that terrified? By the time she caught up to him, Kale was standing in front of the heavy door she'd tried to open weeks ago, punching a code into the electronic lock with shaking hands. "Kale, what?" "I told you to stay back," he snapped, but there was no heat in it, just fear. The door swung open, and Kale disappeared inside. Niall hesitated for exactly 3 seconds before following. The West Wing was different from the rest of the mansion. Where the other parts were all elegant decoration and expensive furniture, this hallway was stark and functional. White walls, fluorescent lighting, doors with small windows like a hospital. Or a prison. Kale had stopped in front of one of the doors, his hand on the handle, his whole body rigid. "Please," a weak voice came from inside. "Please, I didn't mean to." The table just. Niall's breath caught. There was someone in there. Kale opened the door slowly, and Niall peered over his shoulder. The room looked like a combination of a bedroom and a medical facility. There was a hospital bed, various monitors, an IV stand, and a small table overturned on the floor, surrounded by broken glass. In the bed was a young man who couldn't have been more than 17 or 18. He was painfully thin, with dark hair and features that marked him as Asian, Korean probably. His skin was pale, almost translucent, and there were dark circles under his eyes. But what caught Niall's attention was the restraint on his wrist, keeping him tethered to the bed. "I'm sorry," the young man whispered, tears streaming down his face. "I just wanted water and I knocked the table and—" "It's okay, Min," Kale said, his voice infinitely gentle. He moved into the room and began cleaning up the broken glass with his bare hands. "It's okay. I'm not angry." "Who is that?" the young man Min asked, his eyes landing on Niall. Kale glanced back, his expression complicated. "That's Niall, my wife." Min's eyes widened. "You got married when? Why didn't you tell me?" "It's complicated." Niall stepped into the room, ignoring Kale's warning glance. "Hi, Min, are you okay? You're not hurt." Min shook his head. "No, I'm fine, just clumsy." "He's not clumsy," Kale said quietly, disposing of the broken glass in a container. "He's sick." "What kind of sick?" Kale was silent for a long moment. "The kind that comes from a vampire turning going wrong," he finally said. Niall's brain struggled to process that. "You tried to turn him into a vampire." "No, someone else did. And they did it badly, either through incompetence or cruelty. The transformation didn't complete. Min is stuck between human and vampire, not fully either, slowly dying in constant pain." Min looked away, shame written across his young face. "How long has he been like this?" Niall asked. 3 years. I found him dying in an alley in Seoul. The vampire who turned him had abandoned him when the transformation started failing. I brought him here, and I've been trying to find a cure ever since." "There is no cure," Min said softly. "We've tried everything." "There's always a cure. I just haven't found it yet." The determination in Kale's voice was heartbreaking. Niall understood now. This was Kale's secret. Not some dark evil hidden in the West Wing, but a desperate attempt to save someone. "Can I help?" Niall asked. Both Kale and Min looked at her in surprise. "Help how?" Kale asked. "I don't know, whatever you need. Someone to sit with Min, to help with research too. I don't know, but you don't have to do this alone." Kale's expression cracked, just for a moment, and Niall saw the exhaustion underneath. 3 years of desperately trying to save someone, of carrying this weight alone. "You don't even know him," Kale said. "I know you, and I know you wouldn't be doing this if Min wasn't worth saving." Min made a small sound, half laugh, half sob. "She's nicer than you said wives would be," he told Kale. "I never said wives weren't nice. I said marriage was complicated. You said it was a trap, and a social construct designed to make people miserable." Niall raised an eyebrow at Kale. "Did you now?" "I may have been cynical," Kale admitted. "May have." Despite everything, Min laughed. It was a weak sound but genuine. I like her, he said. Can she visit me sometimes? It gets lonely in here. Kale looked at Niall, something vulnerable in his eyes. Would you want to? Of course. Then yes, she can visit. Niall spent the next hour in that room while Kale explained Min's condition in more detail. The failed turning had left Min's body in a constant state of cellular breakdown. He needed regular blood transfusions to stay alive, but his body was slowly rejecting them. He was in pain most of the time, exhausted all the time, and according to every vampire Dr. Kale had consulted, living on borrowed time. But you don't believe that, Niall said. I refuse to believe that, Kale corrected. There has to be a way to stabilize him, to either complete the transformation or reverse it. I won't accept that he's just going to waste away. How old were you when someone tried to turn you? Niall asked Min. 16. I was stupid and desperate and thought becoming a vampire would solve all my problems. What problems? Min's expression grew distant. My family was poor, really poor. I was the oldest of 4 kids and my parents were struggling. A vampire offered me a deal, let him turn me, and he'd pay my family enough money to be comfortable for life. But the turning failed. Yeah, turns out the vampire was inexperienced and reckless. He didn't know what he was doing. The transformation started, but my body rejected it. I started dying, and the vampire panicked and dumped me in an alley. That's horrible. That's the vampire world sometimes. Not everyone is like Kale. Kale had been quiet during this exchange, cleaning and organizing Min's medical supplies with practiced efficiency. Your family, Niall asked Min, do they know you're alive? Min shook his head. They think I died 3 years ago. It's better that way. Is it? They got the money. They're safe and comfortable. If they knew I was like this, suffering, it would destroy them. Better to let them believe I died quickly. Niall understood that logic, the same logic that had led her to lie to her own mother about her marriage. Sometimes love meant protecting people from painful truths. I should let you rest, Kale said, checking one of Min's monitors. The new medication will help you sleep. Okay, Min looked at Niall. Will you come back? Whenever you want. Tomorrow. Niall smiled. Tomorrow. Later that night, Niall and Kale sat in his study, the events of the evening settling over them. I'm sorry I didn't tell you about Min sooner, Kale said, staring into the fireplace. I wanted to, but it's complicated. I get it, you were protecting him. And myself. If the council knew I was harboring a failed turning, they'd demand I end Min's suffering humanely, which is a polite way of saying they'd make me kill him. Niall's blood ran cold. They'd make you kill someone you're trying to save. Failed turnings are considered dangerous, unstable. The merciful thing, according to vampire law, is to end their suffering quickly. That's not mercy, that's murder. I agree, which is why Min's existence is my most carefully guarded secret. Was. Kale looked at her. Was. I know now, which makes it our secret. Something shifted in Kale's expression. Gratitude, relief, and something else Niall couldn't quite name. Thank you, he said quietly. For what? For not running, for not being horrified, for offering to help. Kale, you're trying to save a kid's life. Why would I be horrified by that? Because I'm keeping him in what essentially amounts to a medical prison. Because he's in constant pain and I haven't been able to fix it. Because every day he lives might be torture, and I'm too selfish to let him go. Is Min asking you to let him go? Kale was quiet for a moment. No, he's fighting to live. Then you're not being selfish. You're giving him what he wants, a chance. Kale stood abruptly and walked to the window, his shoulders tense. I watched my brother die, he said quietly, 200 years ago. He was killed by vampire hunters who thought they were protecting humanity. He begged me to save him and I couldn't. I was too weak, too scared. I let him die. Niall went to him, placing a hand on his arm. That wasn't your fault. Wasn't it? I had power and I didn't use it. That you were traumatized and afraid. That's not the same as being responsible. Cale turned to look at her, and Niall saw centuries of guilt in his eyes. When I found Min dying in that alley, he reminded me of my brother. Same age, same desperate will to live. I couldn't let him die. I had to try to save him, even if it meant breaking vampire law, even if it meant risking everything. And you have been saving him. For 3 years you've kept him alive, kept searching for a cure, kept hopping. That's not nothing. It's not enough. Maybe not yet, but it's something. They stood together in the quiet of the study, the fire crackling softly. I didn't expect this, Cale said. Expect what? You, the way you are. When I made the arrangement for a contract wife, I thought I'd get someone who'd play the role and stay out of my life. Instead, I got someone who asks questions, breaks rules, and makes me feel less alone. Niall's heart skipped. Is that a complaint? No, it's an observation, and maybe a confession. Of what? Cale turned to face her fully, his dark eyes intense. That this stopped being just business for me weeks ago. That somewhere between our arguments and our dinners and your stubborn refusal to be intimidated by me, I started actually caring about you. And tonight, watching you meet Min without judgment, offering to help without hesitation, I realized I'm in serious trouble. What kind of trouble? The kind where I'm falling for my fake wife and have no idea what to do about it. Niall's breath caught. She should say something. She should tell him this was complicated, that they had a contract, that she'd be aging while he stayed young, that this could never work. Instead, she said, what if I told you I was in the same kind of trouble? Cale's expression shifted, hope mixed with fear. Then I'd say we're both fools. Probably. Definitely. So what do we do? Cale reached up, his cool fingers brushing her cheek in the same gesture he'd started weeks ago. I have absolutely no idea, he admitted. I've lived for over 2 centuries and I've never felt this lost. That's not very reassuring. Would you prefer I lie? No, I prefer honesty. Then honestly, Niall, I have no idea how this works. I don't know if a vampire and a human can build something real. I don't know how to navigate a relationship that has an expiration date built into the contract. I don't know if what I'm feeling is genuine or just desperation after being alone for so long. But I want to find out if you do. Niall looked up at this ancient, complicated, lonely man who'd somehow become important to her, and made a decision. I want to find out, she said. Cale smiled, that real, transformative smile that made him look almost human. Then he leaned down and kissed her. It was different from the cold, brief kiss at their wedding. This was warm, or as warm as a vampire could be, deep, and full of all the things neither of them knew how to say. When they finally pulled apart, both slightly breathless, Niall laughed. What? Cale asked. I married a vampire to save my family, and I ended up actually falling for him. My life is insane. Is that a complaint? No, it's an observation, and maybe a confession. Cale laughed, pulling her close. We're both disasters. Absolutely. I wouldn't have it any other way. The next few weeks fell into a new rhythm. Niall divided her time between visiting her family, spending time with Min, who turned out to be funny, smart, and addicted to terrible reality TV shows, and navigating her increasingly complicated relationship with Cale. They hadn't told anyone about the shift from fake marriage to something real, partly because it still felt fragile, like saying it out loud might break it, partly because they were still figuring out what it meant. But the touches were real now. The kisses were real. The way Cale looked at her was definitely real. Niall helped Kale with Min's care, keeping him company during the long, painful nights, reading to him, watching shows with him, just being a friend. Min's condition wasn't improving, but at least he wasn't declining as rapidly. Small victories, Kale said. Dante visited one weekend, and Niall gave him a tour of the estate, carefully avoiding the west wing. Her brother was equal parts impressed and overwhelmed. "Your husband is loaded," he said, "like stupid rich." "I'm aware. And you actually like him. This isn't just like a trophy wife situation." Niall thought about how to answer that. "I like him," she said finally. "He's complicated and frustrating and kind of intense, but yeah, I like him." Dante studied her face. "You're happy. I haven't seen you happy in a long time." "I'm getting there." Her mother was improving steadily. The cancer treatment was working, and the doctors were cautiously optimistic. When Niall visited, her mom kept asking when she'd get to properly meet Kale. "Soon, Mama, I promise." "You've been saying that for weeks." "I know, he's just really busy with work." Her mother gave her a knowing look. "Or you're nervous about us meeting." "Maybe a little." "Baby, I just want to meet the man who makes you smile like that. Bring him by. Let me embarrass you with baby stories. It's my right as a mother." Niall laughed. "Okay, I'll talk to him." That night, she brought it up to Kale over dinner. "My mom wants to meet you. Like, properly meet you, not just a quick hello at the hospital." Kale looked nervous, which was hilarious, considering he was an ancient vampire who'd survived wars and centuries of vampire politics. "When?" he asked. "Whenever you're ready, no pressure." "I should meet her. We've been married for almost 2 months. It's strange that I haven't." "It's a weird situation all around." "True, all right, this weekend." "Really?" "I want to meet the woman who raised you. She must be remarkable." Niall felt warmth spread through her chest. "She is." "Okay, y'all, Kale's about to meet Niall's mom and things are getting real. But wait till you see what happens next. Hit that like button if you're loving this story, and subscribe because we're heading into the final act and you do not want to miss how this ends. The weekend visit started out well. Niall's mother had been released from the hospital and was staying at a nice rehabilitation facility that Kale had arranged. She looked stronger, healthier, with color back in her cheeks. When Kale and Niall arrived, Patricia Robinson was sitting in the common room, and her face lit up when she saw them. "There's my baby girl." She stood carefully, and Niall rushed to hug her. "Mama, you look amazing." "I feel pretty good. The doctors say another few weeks and I can go home." She turned her attention to Kale, her expression appraising. "And you must be the mysterious husband." Kale stepped forward, offering his hand. "Mrs. Robinson, it's an honor to finally meet you properly." Patricia shook his hand, then pulled him into a hug that clearly surprised him. "We're family now. We hug in this family." Kale looked to Niall for help. She just grinned. They spent the afternoon talking. Patricia asked Kale about his business. He explained he worked in international investments, which was vague enough to be true, about how they'd met, the rehearsed story about the alley and coffee dates, about his intentions toward her daughter. "I love her," Kale said simply. "She's the best thing that's happened to me in a very long time." Niall's heart did that complicated flip again. Patricia seemed satisfied. "Good. She deserves to be loved. She spent too long taking care of everyone else." They were getting ready to leave when Patricia suddenly grabbed Niall's hand. "Baby, I need to tell you something." "What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong, but your father, before he died, he took out a life insurance policy, small one but enough to cover most of our debts." Niall's blood ran cold. "What?" "I didn't know about it until recently. The company just processed the claim. We're getting a check for $50,000. The same amount Kale had claimed to pay for her mother's treatment." Niall looked at Kale, who was suddenly very interested in the floor. That's great, Mama. It is, which means Kale didn't actually need to pay for everything. We could have managed. The words hung in the air. I don't understand, Niall said, though she was beginning to. I called Kale's office to ask about reimbursing him for the medical bills, Patricia continued, to thank him properly, and they had no record of any payments, so I called the hospital. The bills were all paid, but not by Kale, by some medical foundation. Niall felt like the ground was shifting under her feet. Kale, she asked quietly. He finally looked up, his expression unreadable. Can we discuss this in private? I think that's a good idea, Patricia said, her voice tight. They made it to the car before Niall exploded. You lied to me, she said, her voice shaking. You lied about my family needing money, about paying their bills. I didn't lie, Kale said calmly. I said I'd take care of everything, and I did. By creating a fake crisis. My family wasn't drowning in debt. You manipulated me into this marriage under false pretenses. Your family was struggling. The insurance payout only came through recently, and it wouldn't have been enough for ongoing treatment. That's not the point. You made me think I had no choice, that this was the only way to save my mother. Would you have agreed otherwise? No, because it's insane. Exactly, I needed a wife. You needed security for your family. I ensured you'd agree by presenting the situation in a certain way. Niall stared at him, betrayal burning in her chest. Everything we've built, she whispered. The dinners, the conversations, the feelings, was any of it real? Or was I just another business transaction you manipulated into being? Kale's expression finally cracked. Of course it's real. Niall, what I feel for you is real. How am I supposed to believe that when our entire relationship is built on lies? It's built on necessity that became genuine. Yes, I orchestrated the circumstances, but what happened after that was real. You don't get to decide that. You lied to me, Kale. You made me think my family would suffer if I didn't marry you. That's not romance, that's manipulation. I know, and I'm sorry. Sorry isn't enough. They sat in the car, the silence heavy and painful. What do you want me to say? Kale asked finally. That I was wrong, I was. That I should have been honest from the beginning, I should have. But I needed you, Niall, and I was desperate enough to stack the deck in my favor. Why? Niall demanded. Why did it have to be me? Because you're good. Because you helped me without expecting anything in return. Because in 200 years I'd never met anyone like you. Kale's voice cracked. Because I was lonely and I saw a chance to be less alone, and I took it without thinking about the cost to you. Tears were streaming down Niall's face. I need time, she said. I need to think. Of course. And I'm moving to a different room. I can't be near you right now. Kale flinched like she'd struck him. I understand. The drive back to the mansion was silent. The next week was torture. Niall moved her things to a guest suite on the opposite side of the mansion. She avoided Kale as much as possible, taking her meals in her room, spending time with Min, who noticed something was wrong but didn't pry, and trying to figure out what to do. The contract was for a year. They were 2 months in, 10 months left. Could she stay in a marriage built on manipulation, even if the feelings had become real? Could she? On the 7th day of their separation, Mrs. Key knocked on Niall's door. Mr. Shin requests your presence in the West Wing, she said. It's about Min. Niall's heart sank. She found Kale in Min's room, standing next to the bed. Min was unconscious, his breathing labored, his skin even paler than usual. What happened? Niall asked. He's declining, rapidly, the doctors say. Kale's voice broke. They say it's time, that we should make him comfortable and let him go. No, there has to be something. There isn't. I've tried everything. Every treatment, every experimental drug, every vampire doctor in the world, nothing works. Niall looked at Min, this kid who'd been dealt the worst hand, who'd fought so hard to live, who'd become her friend. "What does Min want?" she asked. "He's not conscious enough to ask." "Then we wait until he is, and we let him decide." Kale looked at her with exhausted, grateful eyes. "You'd stay, after everything." "This isn't about us. This is about Min." They stayed by Min's bedside for hours, monitoring his vital signs, adjusting his medications, waiting for him to wake up. Finally, near dawn, Min's eyes fluttered open. "Kale," he whispered, "Niall." "We're here," Niall said, taking his hand. "I feel really bad." "I know, Min, the doctors say. They say your body is shutting down." Min was quiet for a moment. "Am I dying?" Kale's jaw clenched. "Not if I can help it." "Kale, we both know there's nothing left to try." "There has to be something." "Kale," Min's voice was firm despite its weakness. "It's okay." "It's not okay. You're 18. You should have decades ahead of you." "I've had 3 years I shouldn't have had, because of you. That's not nothing." Tears were streaming down Kale's face, the first time Niall had seen him cry. "I promised I'd save you," he said. "You did save me. Maybe not the way you hoped, but you gave me 3 years of not being alone, of having someone who cared, of feeling like family. That's everything." Niall was crying too now. "Is there anything you want?" she asked. "Anything we can do?" Min thought about this. Can you contact my family, tell them I'm dying? I know I said it was better if they didn't know, but I think I want to say goodbye." "Of course," Kale said. "I'll bring them here." And Min looked between them. "Can you two stop fighting? Whatever happened, work it out. Life's too short to waste it being angry." Niall let out a wet laugh. "That's very wise." "I'm dying, I get to be wise." Min's family arrived the next morning, his parents and 3 younger siblings, all shocked and overwhelmed. Kale had explained that Min had been in an accident, that he'd been in a coma for years, that he was finally waking up enough to say goodbye. It was a kinder lie than the truth. Niall watched from the doorway as Min's mother held his hand, sobbing. His father stood rigid, trying to be strong. His siblings, teenagers now, so different from when Min had last seen them, clustered around the bed. They had an hour together. Min used it to tell them he loved them, to make them promise to take care of each other, to apologize for leaving them. "You gave us everything," his mother said through tears. "Don't apologize." When the hour was up, Min was exhausted. His family said their final goodbyes, and Kale arranged for a car to take them home. Min slipped into unconsciousness shortly after. He died 3 hours later, with Kale holding one hand and Niall holding the other. It was peaceful, quiet, nothing like the violent struggle his life had been for 3 years. Kale arranged a small funeral, just Niall, Mrs. Key, and Min's family. They buried him in a private cemetery on the edge of the estate, under a tree that Min had liked to look at from his window. After everyone left, Kale and Niall stood by the grave. "I failed him," Kale said. "You gave him 3 years he wouldn't have had. You gave him family and hope and someone who fought for him. That's not failure." "He still died." Everyone dies eventually, even vampires sometimes. The measure of a life isn't how long it lasts, but what you do with the time you have. Kale turned to look at her. "Is that forgiveness?" Niall was quiet for a long moment. "I don't know," she admitted. "What you did, lying about my family's situation, that hurt. That was a betrayal, and I don't know if I can just move past it." "I understand. But watching you with Min, seeing how much you cared, how hard you fought, it reminded me that people are complicated. That good people can make bad choices. That love doesn't erase mistakes, but it can coexist with them. So where does that leave us?" Niall looked at Min's grave, at this boy who'd fought so hard for a chance at life, and thought about what he'd said. Life's too short to waste it being angry. It leaves us with a choice, she said finally. We can end this. I can finish out the contract in name only, then we go our separate ways, or we can try, really try, starting from honesty this time. What do you want? I want the truth, all of it. Why you really needed a wife, what you're afraid of, what you're hopping for. No more secrets, no more manipulation. Just honest, messy truth. Kale took a deep breath. All right. The truth is, the council was pressuring me to marry as a way to control me, to prove I was stable and integrating into human society. But the real reason I agreed, the real reason I went to such lengths to make sure you'd say yes, is because I've been alone for so long that I'd forgotten what it felt like to want someone in my life. And when I met you, this brave, kind woman who helped a stranger without hesitation, I didn't just see someone who could play a role. I saw someone I wanted to know, someone I could maybe build something real with. And I was so desperate for that connection that I told myself the ends justified the means. That's still manipulation. I know, and I'm sorry, truly, deeply sorry. If I could go back and do it differently, I would. But you can't. No, all I can do is promise to be better going forward. To be honest, to respect your choices, to be the man you deserve rather than the manipulative coward I was. Niall studied his face, this ancient, complicated man who'd somehow become essential to her. I want to try, she said finally, but I need time. I need to rebuild trust, and I need you to understand that forgiveness isn't the same as forgetting. I understand. And no more secrets about anything. No more secrets. They stood by Min's grave as the sun set, two broken people trying to figure out if they could build something whole together. It wasn't the romantic ending Niall had imagined when she'd first signed that contract. But it was real. And maybe that was enough. Y'all, we're almost at the end. Don't miss the conclusion of this journey. Smash that like and subscribe button because you need to see how Niall and Kale's story ends. The next few months were a slow process of rebuilding. Kale kept his promise. No more secrets. He told Niall about the vampire court's politics, about the enemies he'd made over centuries, about his fears and regrets. He showed her the financial records proving he'd actually been taking care of her family's needs without exaggeration, and helped her mother return home safely. Niall learned to trust again slowly. They had dinner together but without the pressure of pretending. They talked honestly, sometimes fighting, sometimes laughing, always real. Niall enrolled in community college, taking art classes twice a week. Kale arranged for security, more subtle than Mrs. Key constantly hovering, but gave her the freedom to have her own life. They visited Min's grave together every week, leaving flowers and telling him about their progress. He'd be happy we're figuring it out, Niall said one day. He'd probably make fun of how long it's taking us, Kale replied. That too. 6 months into the marriage, 4 months after Min's death, Kale took Niall to the study where they'd first negotiated terms. I want to offer you something, he said, pulling out a familiar-looking contract. Niall's heart sank. Are you ending this? I'm offering you a choice. The original contract said 1 year. We're halfway through. You could leave now with the full payment and your family taken care of, or you could stay. Stay how? As my actual wife. Not a contract, not an arrangement. A real marriage with all the complications and challenges that come with loving an immortal. Niall stared at him. You want that? I want you. In my life, in my home, in my heart, for as long as you'll have me. That's not a long time. I'm human, Kale. I'm going to age and die, and you're going to stay exactly the same. I know, and I've thought about that a lot, about what it means to love someone who won't live as long as I will. But Min taught me something important. Life isn't measured in years. It's measured in moments, in connections, in the love you build. I'd rather have 40 or 50 years with you than an eternity alone. Niall felt tears prick her eyes. What about when I'm old, when I'm not young and pretty anymore? Kale cupped her face gently. You'll still be the woman who defended a stranger in an alley, who stood up to vampire politics without flinching, who befriended a dying boy and made his last days brighter. Those things don't age, Niall, and that's what I love about you. This is insane. Probably. Definitely. Is that a yes? Niall thought about the past 6 months, the pain, the growth, the slow rebuilding of trust. She thought about Min's words about not wasting life being angry. She thought about the way Kale looked at her, like she was the most precious thing in his long, long life. It's a yes, she said, but I have conditions. Kale smiled. Of course you do. 1. We do this as equals. No more you making decisions about my life without consulting me. Agreed. 2. We tell my family the truth. About what you are, about how this started, all of it. I'm done lying to my mother. Kale hesitated. Are you sure? I'm sure she deserves to know. All right, we'll tell her together. And 3. We make new vows. Real ones. Not the cold, contractual ones from the first wedding. Where, when? Here, now, just us. Kale's expression softened. No efficient. We don't need one, we just need each other. They stood in the study, facing each other, and Kale took both her hands. I, Kale Shin, take you, Niall Robinson, as my true wife, not bound by contract but by choice. I promise to be honest, to respect your autonomy, to cherish the time we have together. I promise to be worthy of your trust, to support your dreams, to stand by you in whatever challenges come. I love you, and I will continue to love you for as long as you'll let me. Niall's voice shook as she spoke. I, Niall Robinson, take you, Kale Shin, as my true husband, not because I have to, but because I want to. I promise to be patient as we navigate this complicated, messy thing we're building. I promise to call you out when you're being an overbearing vampire CEO and to support you when you need it. I promise to love you for however many years I have, and I promise that those years will be enough. They kissed, and it was everything the first kiss hadn't been: warm, genuine, full of promise. So, Kale said when they finally pulled apart, what now? Now we live. We make mistakes and fix them. We fight and make up. We build a life that's weird and complicated and real. That sounds perfect. 2 years later. Niall stood in the gallery, her heart pounding as people milled around looking at her artwork. Her first exhibition, paintings and drawings exploring themes of love, loss, and the passage of time. The gallery owner had loved her portfolio, and Kale had been insufferably proud. He stood across the room now, talking to some potential buyers, looking elegant and out of place among the regular humans who had no idea they were in the presence of a vampire. Niall's mother approached, walking with only a slight limp from her recovery. She'd been cancer-free for 1.5 years now. Baby girl, these are beautiful, Patricia said, studying a painting of Min's grave. Thanks, Mama. How are you doing with everything? Everything being the fact that Niall had finally told her family the truth, about Kale being a vampire, about the contract that had started their marriage, about all of it. It had been hard. Her mother had been shocked, hurt, angry, but eventually she'd come around. You're happy, Patricia had said. Strange as this all is, you're happy, and that's what matters. I'm good, Mama, Niall said now, really good. Dante wandered over, a college student now at UCLA, tuition paid by Kale, though Dante was working part-time to contribute. This is so cool, sis. You're like a real artist. I was always a real artist. Now I'm just a showing artist. You know what I mean. Kale joined them, slipping his arm around Niall's waist. You have 3 offers already, he said quietly. I told them you'd consider. Don't buy my paintings just to support me, Niall warned. I'm not, Other people are genuinely interested. I'm simply facilitating. Uh-huh. Later that night, back at the mansion that actually felt like home now, Niall and Kale sat in their room, not separate suites anymore, but a shared space they'd designed together. "You were amazing tonight," Kale said. "I was terrified." Terrified and amazing. Niall leaned against him, comfortable in a way she never thought she'd be with a vampire. "Thank you," she said. "For what?" "For this. For supporting my art, for being patient while I figured things out, for loving me. Thank you for taking a chance on an ancient, manipulative vampire who didn't deserve it. You're working on the manipulative part." "I am. And you never were just ancient. You're also kind, loyal, and surprisingly funny." "Surprisingly." "You have to admit, Ancient Vampire doesn't scream comedian." Kale laughed, pulling her closer. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the moonlight stream through the windows. "Do you ever regret it?" Kale asked quietly, saying yes, staying. Niall thought about the question seriously. Her life had changed so completely from what she'd planned. She'd married a vampire, lost a friend, discovered a passion for art she'd buried, and fallen in love in the most complicated way possible. "No," she said finally, "I don't regret it. It's been hard and weird and sometimes scary, but it's also been real. And I wouldn't trade that for anything. Even knowing it will end someday. Especially knowing that. We don't get forever, Kale, but we get now, and that's enough." Kale kissed the top of her head. "I love you, Niall Shin." "I love you too, you dramatic vampire." "Dramatic?" "Oh, extremely dramatic. You literally have a secret medical wing in your mansion." It's been converted to a media room." "Still dramatic." They talked and laughed late into the night. Two people from completely different worlds who'd somehow found common ground. It wasn't a fairy tale. There would be challenges ahead. Niall aging while Kale stayed young, the dangers of the vampire world, the complications of loving across species. But they'd face those challenges together. And in the end, that was all that mattered. The lesson asterisk. Sometimes the things we think we have to do out of desperation lead us to exactly where we need to be. Niall entered into a contract to save her family, but she found something she didn't know she was missing, a love that was complicated, real, and transformative. The lesson isn't that manipulation is okay if it works out. Kale had to face consequences and earn back trust. Or that you should overlook red flags. Niall held him accountable and demanded better. The lesson is that people are complex. We make mistakes, we grow, we try to be better. Love isn't about perfection. It's about choosing someone despite the complications, working through the hard parts, and building something real together. It's about understanding that life is short, even when you're immortal. That forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting, but it does mean giving people a chance to grow. That sometimes the best things in life come from the most unexpected places. And most importantly, it's about choosing authenticity over pretense, truth over comfort, and love. Messy, complicated, real love over loneliness. Because in the end, we're all just trying to find connection in a complicated world. And when we find it, even if it's not perfect, even if it's scary, even if it won't last forever, we should hold on tight and make the most of every moment we have. If you made it to the end of this wild journey, you're a real one. Drop a like, subscribe for more dramatic romance stories, and comment below what kind of story you want to see next. Love you all.